a sector that really interests our readers. British investors are traditionally big investors in mining. When you're in Canada, you said that the Mexican mining sector is still going to be competitive despite this new tax that we've seen. Can you explain to our readers why?
Yes, because first, this is the first time the Minister of the Economy of Mexico goes to the big meeting of mining in Canada. Last year we just started the government, so we were represented by our mining coordinator. This time I decided to go because we have to explain to investors what is the new vision for mining in Mexico. And what I shared with them, I had a dinner with most of the CEOs that are invested in mining in Mexico and Canada, and I explained them that the way a mining sector as an investment destination is analyzed, you look at the different elements, and most of the firms that are working with, as consultants for mining, they look at first political risk, they look at economic stability, they look at elements like, for instance, the fiscal element as well. They look at the social stability of projects. And so there are 6 to 7 elements that you have to review. And in Mexico, most of those elements, you can grade them A+. Political stability has been shown that with the mere fact of being able to process a package of economic reforms, we are showing to the world that there is the political feasibility of transformation in Mexico, which not many countries can claim on that. You know, that most of the political forces converge on a decision-making process that will transform the economy. And that happened in Mexico in year 2013 with the economic reform package on energy, the financial sector, labor, education, and so forth. And so that is a very good scenario for Mexico. Also, in terms of economic stability, I mean, Mexico has engaged in a very stable decision-making process. On the fiscal front, we have had fiscal responsibility since the middle of the 90s. Today, there is no debate in Congress about the need to have a balanced budget. Monetary policy is conducted by independent authority, the central bank, which has had granted autonomy since the early 90s. And so you have political stability, you have economic stability, and at the same time, the Mexican mining sector has been developed in a good environment in terms of social issues. We are dealing directly with the firms in terms of trying to improve the legal certainty of investments in the rural areas of Mexico. Why? Because sometimes the land has private tenure or corporate tenure, and we're working to make those contracts with much more legal certainty. But at the same time, the other element that you analyze is security, and obviously in terms of security, most of Mexico is improving in terms of security since President Peña took office.
Although there's still pockets. I mean,
that's exactly the point that I discussed with our friends from Canada. That for those pockets, like some states, a couple of states where we have problems, we are working with the mining investors to tailor-made specific security adjustments to guarantee their process in the areas where they are working in mines. So the Ministry of the Interior of Mexico is working closely with the Ministry of the Economy to target the couple of states where we still have issues regarding security. Now, what I explained them in terms of the new tax, that definitely we are aware that Mexico, we made a sudden change because for a long time we were lag in terms of the tax system. We're just charging what we call derechos, or rights, on land tenure on mining, regardless of the type of mining we were doing. And there was no correlation between the value and the royalty that was being charged, or derecho that was being charged. Now we have muted or moved to a new system that is more according to world practice, on a tax on levy, which definitely, you may think that it was the 7.5% plus the 0.5 for precious metals. Just by looking at the number, you may think that that will take us out of a competitive environment. But you have to wait until the month of April when the miscelánea fiscal, or the tax rules are put out, to realize how it is going to be applied. Mining is developed in three main stages: exploration, exploitation, and metallurgical process.
Mhm.
This tax, and it will be clear on the April fiscal rule, is applied on the first two stages of mining, exploration and exploitation. When you leave out metallurgical process from the value added of the production, the net burden of the tax is reduced. So it will be, we have been making exercises very similar to what the other countries on a very competitive edge, like Mexico, are at around a net 5% burden. So when you analyze the overall of these issues, you realize that considering all of elements together, Mexico is still going to be a very competitive country. And our resources are abundant, and definitely for us, mining has been a tremendous growth area. Today, mining represents almost 5% of GDP, between 4 and 5% of GDP, which is even more than agriculture.
But how did so when you said all this to the CEOs over your dinner, how did they take it? Were they receptive?
Yeah, most of them, I mean, it is quite interesting to analyze that most of the Canadian investors in Mexico, they came as a medium-sized companies that invested and took a bet on the future of Mexico with very limited capital. And they became very successful. They really ride the boom of mining in Mexico. And today they have grown from a small company to a medium, large-sized companies, thanks to the experience in Mexico. So most of them are very grateful for what they have done in Mexico, and they are ready to dialogue with us for the future. We don't want to lose them, and they want to be responsible players in the future of the country.
If we change tack slightly and talk about the workforce, because I know that you're keen to improve the productivity of the workforce, we've met with some companies and they've told us that there's a challenge. They say, no, Mexican workers are good, but they say what's being produced by the public universities are often very crowded and they're not producing enough good graduates in certain areas. And they say that the private universities are too expensive. So some of the companies we spoke to say that they've identified that as a problem. What are you doing to try and improve the quality of the Mexican workforce?
Well, let me first, I think that to start with, one of our great assets of the Mexican economy is the talent and the creativity of the labor force. I can give you examples, and then I will put what you have been told in perspective, and I don't dismiss the strength of the arguments.
Mm-hmm.
But let me put this into perspective. First of all, I don't know if you know Pierre Baudouin, the owner of Bombardier.
Mm-hmm.
He's producing his planes, and he integrates the production chains between Canada, Mexico, and the US. They are planes that are fully integrated into these three countries. When you hear his talks in conferences, he says that when he came to Mexico 20 years ago, he came attracted for the low-cost labor. Then he realized that there was a tremendous potential on the Mexican labor force, to such extent that he developed his human resources in Mexico. Now he's using Mexicans to go around his plants around the world, to train workers in other countries. The capacity to troubleshooting of his labor force in Mexico has been extremely good in such a way that he's taken the executives from Mexico to other plants in the world. So, and that is the experience of many other companies. That being said, I also agree with you that some companies, like in the car industry, in the auto part industry, what they have done is there are two types of human resources that are needed in today's manufacturing industry in Mexico. The technical individuals, the ones being trained technically, and the ones going to engineering schools for more sophisticated training. On the first part, the technicians, most of these companies are taking the boys and the girls out of school, the technical school, and they finish training them in their own centers. I just visited a very important plant in the auto part industry in Guanajuato.
Mhm.
The one is a German plant that does the lightening of the cars. And what I discovered is that first, half of the labor force were women.
Mhm.
And were they were trained, most of them from Guanajuato, from the little towns of Guanajuato, trained first in the technical schools in the state, and then finished in the projects managed by this company. That at the end result, I mean, definitely you have a point. It's not just the number, but the quality of engineers you are producing. Where the president has asked us to coordinate our efforts with the Ministry of Education. The Ministry of Education is working in cooperation with the German government on this dual educational system for technicians. But at the same time, we have to align the programs for the engineering schools to be adapted to the new requirements of the manufacturing industry, mechatronics, aviation, and all these new areas. The way this challenge has been faced is that in some cases, like in the case of Querétaro, when we started pushing to have a cluster for airspace there was a decision to be made also to open a university specialized in training aviation engineers and technicians. So working very closely with the plant owners or the investors in order to really at the same time produce the human resources that are going to be needed. At the end, I will just conclude to say it's a challenge.
Mhm.
We have to really make sure that we have enough human resources with the capacity to keep providing the manufacturing industry's development for the future. And we are completely aware of that. That's why also the educational reform became very important, because the only way you can get good engineers is that in the elementary school, maths and sciences are part of a strong part of the curricula that has to be taught to students.
Thank you, that was a very comprehensive. Another thing I wanted to ask you is that you said recently that from 2016, Mexico will start to attract between 30 or 40 billion dollars of foreign direct investment per year. And I just wanted you to explain to my readers what are the driving forces behind this increase in FDI?
Well, as you have researched, the average flows of foreign investment to Mexico after NAFTA, we signed NAFTA, I mean, we implemented NAFTA in 1994, that on average about 20,000 billion dollars a year.
Mm-hmm.
This year, I mean, 2013, we closed 2013 with $35.2 billion of investment. Obviously, that figure, which has been a record figure since we collect data on investment, includes a big chunk of the transaction for the Modelo beer company, which was about $13 billion. So when you deduct that from the number, it's about $22 billion, which is a very good number compared to 2012. We had something like $13 billion. So we topped that on almost $10 billion. But looking towards the future, you have different elements that are going to change the game, I mean, basically. And one has to do with the new era for manufacturing in North America. When you look that North America is going to have access to competitive and inexpensive sources of energy, like shale gas, when you see that Mexico has a demographic balance, our labor force is going to grow by 32% from here to the year 2050, while China in the same period is going to be reducing 37%, 38%. Korea will reduce the labor force with 37%. So the demographic bonus is tremendous. And at the same time, innovation and developments in technology linked to the manufacturing sector are happening very dynamically in North America, in Mexico, US, and Canada. Basically, the leading is in the US. So the NAFTA region has a tremendous opportunity to becoming a manufacturing platform with very, very few competition in the world when you look at these elements. So that by itself is going to have, and is already resulting in an increased interest to localize production. I'm talking to a lot of investors trying to bring their operations back from Asia into North America. And add to that as the regulation of sectors that were close, energy, or very much concentrated like telecommunications. So that's also a very specific, direct, new appeal to invest in Mexico. So adding all that together, it is easily that you can predict that foreign direct investments from the average of the post-NAFTA times can increase by 50% from the average of 20,000 to an average that will exceed $30,000. So those are the elements behind why we are expecting an increase in foreign direct investment.
Thank you. For my final question, I just want to ask you, I think my readers have a pretty good idea of the Mexican economy, and a lot of my readers will have invested in Mexican mining companies like Fresnillo, which is listed in London, or maybe manufacturing companies, car manufacturers. Could you tell my readers about any alternative, untraditional sectors of the Mexican economy that are going to emerge over the next 5 years and create opportunities? So not in mining, not in car manufacture, but any new exciting areas that we're going to see?
Well, definitely, as a result of the economic reforms that President Peña has been able to accomplish, telecommunications will be a sector to look at very, very closely. I also will say that anything related with energy or servicing energy, any kind of companies that serve the energy companies, will be very interesting to look at in the close term. And besides that, there are a couple of sectors that are in a very dynamic point. One is airspace, and the other one is IT, information technology. I think that we have a lot of advantages. Most of the big US companies are located in Mexico. IBM, Hewlett Packard, most of the big American companies in the IT sectors are in Mexico. And they are looking into Mexico as an alternative, a complementary way for growth. So here in Mexico, Guadalajara is hosting a very important project on that sector. They call it Digital City.
Okay.
And the idea is to really design a public policy agenda together with the main leaders of the sector in North America to really give an alternative for Mexico to grow to rapidly in IT.
Excellent. Minister, thank you.
Thank you.